and welcome to the 2022 Varsity Sports Network presentation of Florida Lacrosse News here on our Varsity Sports channels. I'm your host, Bobby Latmore, joined by Lee Roggenberg from Florida Lacrosse News. Lee, how are you today?
Bobby, I am just so hyped and great for doing this. Glad you're hosting it. We've got another 8 days until the start of the season. Jamboree's next Saturday. How could I not be excited with all of the new stuff that's coming down the pike for lacrosse in the state of Florida this year?
Well, let's talk about you. Let's talk about Florida Lacrosse News so everybody gets an idea of the information, where it's coming from, who you are, and how you are so passionate about lacrosse. Tell us a little bit about Lee Roggenberg and Florida Lacrosse News.
Well, the site's been around for about 13 years now. This is my 10th year writing for the site. My interest in the sport actually goes back to the late 70s. Grew up on Long Island. I remember when Channel 11 in New York would broadcast on, they were picking up the feed of the college game of the week out of Baltimore. Then my interest really peaked when I went up to Hobart College, which I did not really know very much about their lacrosse program until I actually got there. And then 1977 was the first season that I saw lacrosse live in person. And it was just an incredible year, maybe Hobart's best ever. And that kind of got me hooked even further. Then after the 4 years there, of which the last 2 were spent filming the games for Coach Dave York and the program, kind of went back to New York, and like so many others, just kind of followed wherever I could. It was not easy getting lacrosse information back then, and maybe you saw a couple of minutes of the championship game on the old CBS Sports Spectacular, Bobby, if you remember.
Oh my gosh, you bring back, you dating me on that. I remember that.
Yeah, that's about a month after the championship game. They maybe sneak 20 minutes of highlight film in. And then finally, after some years, I moved down to Florida in 1991. Just tried to keep track as well as I could. Then about 2006, I just kind of needed a little bit of a diversion. Started watching the St. Andrews games, and I found out how good a program they were. One thing led to another. A couple of years later, I was eventually introduced to the people who ran Florida Lacrosse News. And they asked me to write about some things if I was interested to do so. And for whatever reason, my style of writing and covering a game basically took off, and there was a lot of interest in what we were writing. The site readership has gone up quite well over the years. Last year, we started our own YouTube channel for our morning coffees, as we used to call it. A little bit of a wrap up of the previous night's activities. And basically, my passion has always been there. It's such a wonderful sport. Sport's the fastest growing sport in America for many years. And the kids just love participating. And we're seeing more and more Florida trending towards being a hotbed for the sport.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Schools have picked this up in the last 5, 6, 7 years now, Lee, to where it's been more of it used to be a club sport here in the high schools, but now it's become an actual sport here for the FHSAA, and other associations across the state have acknowledged it as a primary sport. So they do have championships for it and all that. Tell us a little bit about Florida. Tell us a little bit about how much you're covering in Florida here for Florida Lacrosse News, and what we can expect coming here in 2022 here on Varsity Sports Network.
Well, yeah, the interesting thing is that we've actually pretty much covered the whole scene on the lacrosse side. We have youth, which, to be honest, I spend more time sort of networking at events than covering them, only because it's club. It's supposed to be a little bit more fun. It gets maybe a little too over the top at times. But that part of it, our main focus clearly is on the high school side. There are over 200 varsity programs, both on the boys and the girls side, plus another maybe 40 to 50 that are still in the club status. But we have some new programs. We have a couple of new programs that seem to pop up every year. Although, to be fair, we've also lost a couple in the last couple of years, where schools that maybe weren't competitive and sort of have dropped out. And then we have a very competitive college scene in this state too. Florida Gators, very high end Division One women's program. Jacksonville was a top 15 program last year on the girls' side. Stetson is the other Division One program on the girls, and then we have the Jacksonville men's program also, who had a very close result yesterday up in Baltimore, taking Johns Hopkins in a close game. And then the whole Division Two Sunshine State Conference. Flagler College just started their program this year, and they're in the Peach Belt Conference for this year. And then we have a fairly significant club college scene too. The Gators on the men's side, Florida State, both men's and women's, FAU, Florida Gulf Coast, UNF, UCF, USF. USF has actually announced that they're going to be doing a women's varsity program in the near future also.
Very good.
So, we've got everything. And we had the Florida launch for 6 years, I believe it was, on the professional side. And we're hoping that the Premier Lacrosse League, the PLL, will make Florida one of their weekend stops, if not this year, next year, and into years in the future. So you really see this in two ways, Bobby. You see all of these northern coaches who have relocated from hotbeds up north, coming down, creating wonderful programs. And you're also seeing on the club level national programs that have sort of bought into the scene down here too. And you're seeing those which go to national tournaments. It's really sort of a two-part club system. That type of club, and then you have the local clubs that tend to be high schools and the feeder programs for the high schools. And that's when you really start to get the sport ingrained going forward, as far as when you have your feeder programs for your high schools, or if you're a private K through 12 and you've got kids who are picking up a stick in second and third grade already, and they're starting to really get the coaching and the IQ that really make the difference between, say, the New York and Maryland version of the sport and a Florida or a Texas or a Georgia, or the ones who are on the way up to joining that elite status. We even had the Tewaaraton Trophy win out of Florida last year, Tewaaraton being the Heisman Trophy of college lacrosse, with Jared Bernhardt, Lake Brantley grad, his two older brothers, both national team members for the U.S. Men's national team. We are just seeing an explosion. We are seeing depth, and we have such a bright future for the sport in this state.
One more quick question. How early are these kids starting here in the state of Florida? Lee, you mentioned second grade, third grade. Really, this sport has really started out as mostly just a college sport. Then it moved into the high schools. Now it's moving into, like you said, younger youth organizations here in Florida. So how young are these kids really starting out here in lacrosse here in Florida?
Well, let's put it this way. Since I live in Boca, over the years, I've been familiar with the Boca Jets youth program. I saw 5-year-olds at the last, at a training session. That should give you an idea of what's going on with it. I think the kids themselves are just fascinated by the action. And that, I think, is what draws them at first, the running around. I mean, this is a sport where you get into shape as a kid. And if you're a mom, see, a lot of moms, I think, also are getting a little leery about football in some ways, particularly with the concussion issues. And, some moms are kind of saying, I'm not really crazy about the kid playing football, but I'll let them play lacrosse. And lacrosse is pretty physical too.
Yeah, it is.
But it pairs very well. There's a lot of football, lacrosse, crossover, hockey, lacrosse, crossover. One thing that I always found interesting, St. Thomas Aquinas' football coach and the athletic director, they're lacrosse people too, to give you an example of something like that. And then you look around the state and how many of the other high-end programs. The kids just, the little kids like to see older kids. You know,
Yes.
when we
Good
were
point.
kids,
Yep.
you and I, when we were maybe at 10 years old, 12 years old, we might have had a neighbor who was a high school athlete, and we admired them
Hmm.
and we wanted to see them play. And I think you're seeing that in lacrosse now too down here. It's now been around long enough that the really young kids have grown up, they've had success in college, and that filters down to the younger kids. This is a family sport too. It's not unusual to see two, three, four members of the family making their mark. And they sort of learn from the older brother and older sister too. A lot of brother-sister combinations in the sport too. So I think that that's a main part of why you're seeing younger and younger the kids flocking to it.
Let me ask you a quick question before we go to break here, Lee. Lacrosse here in high schools are played in the spring. Should we move that to another season?
Uh, I don't know if it really would make much of a difference. Uh, the issue, I think, with moving it to the fall would be maybe field availability. A lot of time, most of the time the lacrosse team is playing on the football field. And, you've been around this long enough to know there are ADs and college and football coaches who are a little leery of having their turf played upon by something else.
Oh, yeah.
If they have a say in it. And also, you would lose those players who do play both sports.
Mm-hmm.
You really can't play. It's impossible to play both of the sports at the same time. It's just
You get a time where you have, like we mentioned, football players. Some do play lacrosse and football, but you also have in the spring baseball players who now are juggling between those two sports, and they're both in the spring. It's affecting a little bit on baseball side. It's affecting a little bit on some other sports too. But if you put it in the winter, because Florida does not have hockey, which is played in the winter, would that be a better time? Because I know field availability with soccer going on at that time as well. But what does winter look like for lacrosse?
I think that the bigger problem with that is up north, in the northern part of the state, where maybe, down here, it probably doesn't matter when you play it, because you're pretty much going from, let's say in September, you're at 90 degrees at the start of the school year, you're cooling down. And by the time we get to the Final Four in lacrosse in early May, we're getting close to that type of temperature again. And then down here where we are, where we have so few really cold days, and to be honest, I'm really none if you take it with the I went to college in upstate New York. When I see people wearing a winter coat in 50 degrees and down here, I'm laughing, because at 50 degrees after winter up there, we're in shirt sleeves.
Right.
So it's sort of, the interesting thing, since you made the comment about baseball, is I think that that's the sport where the effect is seen the most. And just a quick little side story on that. I remember about maybe 4 or 5 years ago, opening day for baseball. I'm watching CNBC. They have Mike Piazza up to ring the opening bell. Mike lives in South Miami. And so he was asked about why are baseball's TV ratings falling? Why aren't kids watching baseball on TV? And his first response was, well, where I live, kids are playing lacrosse. Exact first thing he actually said. And, that's South Florida. That's South Miami. That's a large Latin population.
Right.
That's another thing that's interesting about the sport, is that even though sports still got a ways to go to have more of a full diversity, you've had some strong Latin teams, mostly Latin players, that have done very well in this sport. Berlin Jesuit had an excellent year last year. Remember some years ago when Columbus went to the regional finals with an almost all Latin team. I told the story of Immokalee in our previous taping. That's mostly Hispanic and Black. John I. Leonard was, it didn't sustain, but it was mostly a minority team. There are, it's just that I think that the problem is that it's taking away from baseball because I think the kids just prefer at the margin to try lacrosse first. And and to be honest, I think that's part of the problem with ADs withdrawing the sport is the perception that we're going from a football, basketball, baseball world that has been reigning for so long in this country, that the shift that you're kind of seeing to where maybe it's sort of football and then soccer 1A, basketball is still pretty much reigning in the winter. And then you've got baseball and lacrosse kind of competing for that student athlete in the spring. And it's something that is a little difficult for those who've grown up with the earlier paradigm to really deal with.
Right. Without a doubt. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, more with the Florida lacrosse news here on the Varsity Sports Network. We'll talk about the 2021 finals and talk a little bit more about reclassification and new districts coming up, or I should say new regions, and the way the playoffs are going to be set up here coming up in 2022. We're here with Lee Roggenberg here for the Florida lacrosse news. We'll be back right after this on the Varsity Sports Network.
Hello, my name is Frank Lavalio with Security Financial Management. For the last 35 years, we've been helping formulate tax-efficient retirement income plans. Many of our clients are extremely concerned with increasing federal debt and that taxes could go up significantly. Call today for your no-obligation complimentary consultation. We have the specific tools to help you develop your own tax-efficient retirement income plan.
It's time to grow up, little wildflower. So don't you worry now. There's no need to hurry now. It's been a long, long day, and you can shine now.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Varsity Sports Network. Get out here now. Beautiful. Oh, surging in right at the top of the sixth. Jabari pads a little slim. He's gone. Football really gives these head coaches.
Welcome into Sports of Episode 2 out today.
This is the high school scoreboard show right here on Varsity Sports Network.
Welcome back, everybody, here to Varsity Sports Network and the Florida Lacrosse News 2022 preview here for the FHSA lacrosse season about to happen coming up next week. We're here with Lee Roggenberg from Florida Lacrosse News. I'm your host, Bobby Latmore on Varsity Sports Network. Lee, what a great year. We came back after a COVID year of spring being shut down, but we came back here in 2021. We played lacrosse, and we had a great season last year, didn't we?
It's just, just after missing the end of 2020, and something that maybe a lot of people down here don't realize is that we were the only state that got as far into the schedule as we did. Texas got a little closer, South Carolina maybe, but there were some of the main states up north in 2020 didn't even really play. So we got about 2/3 through the regular season. That's what made it, if anything, a little bit harder to come back to in 2021, and knowing the stories that were left untold at the end of the year and what the playoffs might have looked like. And so, coming into 2021, we knew that we were going to have some change from 2020, because two of the schools in 2020 were really geared for that year. A lot of seniors had been playing together. They're going to make their run. Down here in my way, in particular, Kings Academy, American Heritage Plantation were really geared for 2020, and they fell off a decent amount last year, unfortunately. But when we got to the Final Fours, the two classes made such a difference as far as who was going to be playing who. We had 5 first-time participants among the 16 Final Four teams when you look at both the boys and the girls. And when it came to the boys, we had some incredible stories. We had a Final Four where on the boys' side, St. Edwards matched up against Bowles in the semifinals. Bowles with a big upset over Oak Hall in their region. St. Edwards with an upset in the district final over Benjamin, and they managed to make it all the way through the final game. Then on the other side, we had St. Andrews, which had not won a state title since 2012, I believe. And for those who have followed the sport over the years, even pre-FHSAA sanction, this is a school that had won 9 consecutive state championships. We were so used to them being the dominant program. Then Lake Highland came along. Then you had a couple of years of St. Thomas, Ponte Vedra, Jupiter. And then eventually you get to the point now where we have 2 classes. And so all of the mix of teams changed. Canterbury made the Final Four over out of Fort Myers, gunning by Cardinal Mooney in their district, and then basically getting through Tampa Jesuit on their way to the Final Four. St. Andrews over Berlin and Pinecrest on their trip to the Final Four. St. Edwards with that incredible overtime win at Lake Highland, and first round win over Holy Trinity. Bowles getting past McClay by a goal after the upset over Oak Hall. Bowles 2-goal win in the first round, 1-goal win in the second round, and then losing 2 goals. They had a magical run there too. So it's great to see new schools. Canterbury, a particular favorite of mine, because the high school, the head coach, Trent Carter, is the only other Hobart grad
There you go.
who's the head coach. And he's built a great.
Got to stick together.
Yeah, he had built Baron Collier, and then moved over to Canterbury and has now built a fine program there. It just, when you saw those things, when it came down to it though, but we knew St. Andrews was the team to beat by the time we got to the tournament. They had run the table, pretty good schedule. They didn't play everyone. We had those COVID interruptions. Most of the major schools had a 10-day or 2-week sort of gap because someone on the team caught it or they had to shut down or whatever it was. And so they didn't quite play all of the games they were going to play, but we knew their defense was incredible. Offense was solid, great goaltending, and they were the favorites, and they came through and won the whole thing, and to be honest, comfortably. St. Ed's drew within maybe 2-3 goals in the second half, but St. Andrews ran away for the 13-5 win in the championship. On the 2A side, again, we had a little bit of a mix. Ponte Vedra getting upset in their district final by Creekside. That changed that bracket substantially. Then in the first round, Lake Mary and Creekside, which is a top 10 matchup in the state, being in the first round. Lake Mary, I actually went up to that game, covered that game. And Lake Mary coming out in that game on their way to the Final Four, took out Windermere easily in the second round. Fleming Island in the second round. Winter Park, the Orlando team, Had Boone in the first round, comfortably won that. Windermere in the second round, comfortably won that. Edged Lake Mary 12-10 the semifinals to make their final. Then you kind of go down and look at the other side. Plant over Steinbrenner and Newsom comfortably. Jupiter coming out of the south, easy wins over Stoneman, and then an amazing 1-goal game over St. Thomas at St. Thomas. That was 2 of the top 4 teams in the state playing in a regional final. And so that was a great win for the Warriors. And then we have the final, Jupiter over Winter Park. Jupiter had handled Plant comfortably, which was a surprise. I think that Plant has an awful lot of talent. They've gone up to Ponte Vedra, played a tough game up there, and a 1-goal loss. They had a lot of high-end talent. And when it just came down to is I think that Jupiter exposed the one weakness that they had. And Jupiter, it was really a toss-up whether it was Jupiter or St. Andrews was really the best team in the state last season. And obviously that would have been potentially a regional final in the 1-class system.
Right.
So you can imagine Jupiter, St. Thomas, St. Andrews, all in a region playing to go on to the Final Four under that system. But Jupiter, fabulous offense, probably as good a 6-man unit I've seen over the years down here. And they handled Plant easily, and they pulled away and handled Winter Park 12-8 in the final. I certainly think they deserved it. And I think what it comes down to, and when we get to discussing what the upcoming season is, you'll see that this is sort of a result. The Southeast just has more teams at a higher level.
Right.
And because they're playing each other so much, they sort of got used to the tough situations, the close games. Then you look, and I'll give a little tease for maybe the next segment about this part. You look at Plant's schedule this year, and you will see a major difference in their non-area schedule. And I think that's completely in response to knowing they have to get prepared for Final Four weekend. If you're going to win the thing, you've got to play high-end competition as much as possible. And they'll be able to do that this year. And there's going to be a lot of other schools too. But St. Andrews, Jupiter, worthy winners on the boys' side in 2021. St. Andrews is certainly in the mix. Jupiter is going to be interesting. Lost a lot of players, but they have a deep squad. They're at a point where they've got a substantial feeder program. The question is going to be, how do you replace so many top-end players? But this is 1A and 2A, great championships, wonderful atmospheres, and just it's terrific for the sport down here.
You mentioned tougher schedules. They had some of these teams are getting better with more scheduling higher caliber teams so that they can keep up, because something's happening a little different this year here with the playoffs. We just went over what happened in the state championship brackets last year. Last year was set up by district winner and district loser going to the playoffs. This year, it's a little different coming into 2022, isn't it, Lee?
Actually, district loser did not make the brackets. Remember, we were still.
That's right. We were still doing the COVID thing. That's exactly right. Yeah. So it was just the winners.
Mm-hmm. Yes. The talk was maybe they were going to try to push the at-large bids in last season, but they decided to table that and vote on it for this year. And yes, major difference. Now, I'm going to speak a little bit. I'm like 99% sure of this, but I should have asked the FHSAA the question to make myself 100%. I kind of learned that lesson over the years.
So wait.
And it looks like the way it's going to work is that, first of all, unless the area or the county requires it, you don't have to play your district teams in your regular season. But everyone will make the district. They will be ranked according to max preps. And then the district winner goes to the region, that's 4. And then the 4 at-large bids, based, I believe, on the next 4 highest rated max preps teams in the region, And then I believe they're going to seed 1 through 8, which I think would be fantastic. I actually, a couple of years ago, actually did an article predicting if we had gone to a 64 team 1 class bracket. And it's going to work out very similar in the matchups to what you're going to
Right.
see with 1 through 8 in each. You're going to have 64 teams instead of 32. And that gets around the issue that we've had in a lot of areas of the state. Last year, Ponte Vedra would have had an at-large bid. Last year, Benjamin would have had an at-large bid. We had in the past Oxbridge, St. Andrews, and St. John Paul in the same district. We've had plenty of other examples where 2 teams would have made it to the brackets. That is a major difference, and that's something I am so looking forward to, not just as a writer, but as a fan, to see we're going deeper. It takes away a bad day. One bad day, you go home. Benjamin sort of had a bad day. St. Edward's played a great game that game. And look what happens. St. Edward's is in the championship game. Now, one of the things that we're going to find very interesting is that there was a little bit of a difference in how the regions are being set up. And some districts have changed around, and that has changed the regions that the teams are in too. So we're going to see a little bit of a different mix when it comes to who's in a particular region. But there are a couple of schools also that I think got quite a break in this reclassification, and probably Winter Park being the biggest one. I was sort of looking at who's in Winter Park's region that could challenge them. I'm not sure there's anyone in the 4 districts who legitimately can challenge them this year. So I expect Winter Park to pretty much go straight to the Final 4. But then I look at down my way, and I see 13 teams that could legitimately compete for the 8 slots in 1A in Region 4. So you're going to see some very intriguing matchups, and you're going to see an awful lot of maneuvering to try to get in that top 8, or at least in that second level of top 4 for the at-large berths. And the schedules are substantially changing for a lot of these teams.
So
and,
before let's take a break right here on that real quickly. Let's talk about the ranking system from Max Preps. Are you familiar with how the power rankings are established?
Just enough calculated? On a general basis. I mean, I'm relatively good at math, but I've never done a deep dive into their methodology. But yeah, well, when we come back, yeah, I think we'll talk a little bit about it. And okay. I happen to have printed out the top 25 from each, the boys and the girls together, and I can kind of take you through this and show you a little bit about maybe where I would disagree, and then talk a little bit about why maybe they came up with what they came up with.
More here from Florida Lacrosse News on Varsity Sports Network right after this.
Remember me for centuries.
Welcome back to the Florida Lacrosse News segment here on the Varsity Sports Network. Bobby Lattimore joined by Lee Roggenberg from Florida Lacrosse News. And Lee, we talked a lot about last year's rankings, a lot about last year's finals and how it all ended. Great lacrosse tournament last year. But this year, we're going to see a little bit more different, as we talked about, with the new power rankings that will be established for the state playoffs as well. But let's go back over 2021 one more time in the final polls that came out for the end of the year last year.
Yeah, I find it interesting that Max Preps went in a little bit different direction than I did when it came to the final polls. And just to give you an idea, Max Preps top 15 for 1A on the boys' side went St. Andrews, Pinecrest, St. Ed's, Benjamin, Oak Hall, Berlin, Canterbury, Jesuit, Oxbridge, St. John Paul, Bowles, Cardinal Mooney, Lake Highland, American Heritage, and Gulliver Prep. My poll had St. Andrews, obviously. I have St. Edwards. If you get to the championship game, you're automatically number 2 with me, regardless of the numbers. I had Pinecrest at 3. The only 2 losses were to St. Andrews. Oak Hall at 4. Jesuit and Berlin tied at 5. So 5 versus 8 in that for Tampa Jesuit. Bowles at 7 on my poll versus 11 there. Benjamin at 8, and so they were 4. See, I think what happens, without necessarily going through the whole thing, I think what happens is that because Max Preps is purely a mathematical calculation, you tend to have situations, and again, I don't know how they treat a bad loss, for instance. Benjamin had a couple of bad losses. But on the other hand, when you saw them in person, they had some pretty darn good games too. But they were a team that if you had a COVID kid out or someone who was injured, it affected them maybe a little bit more. And how do you rank, for instance, they go up to play Ponte Vedra, they played a terrible game. But it's a 5-hour trip each way. Mm-hmm. How do you sort of put that in your mind? The math might treat that differently than me saying it's an outlier. And so that's kind of what it is. I saw 60 schools in person last year, boys and girls combined. I'm always going to trust what I see as far as the quality of the team more than anything. And that's kind of sometimes, and when I do a deep dive, I understand that strength of schedule makes a difference. It makes a difference, obviously, in the math too. But how it makes the difference to them versus me is not something I really know. So there will always be a couple of differences as far as how I judge a team versus how the math will judge the team. And I particularly focus on head-to-head and if it's close. Now, the interesting thing sometimes where I get into trouble on the poll is that we have an awful lot of A beats B, B beats C, and then C comes back and beats A. That tends to happen a lot, particularly in your areas where maybe you have 3 solid programs.
Right.
You looked at Plant, Tampa Jesuit, Berkeley Prep. For years, they would swap wins in a season. And so it comes down, it's not an exact science. But what I will say is that it's very rare that I get an irate coach at the end of the year with my rankings. And I think that's just because they know that I see enough. I talk to a lot of people. I rely on my eyes. And I think that they understand that, all right, maybe one year they should have been an 8 and they were an 11, something along those lines. I think it's a lot of fun for the parents to have me doing this. I think it's a lot of fun for the kids. It's a lot of fun for the programs.
That's what everybody goes for. I mean, look at college, how college, everybody waits for the rankings to come out. Everybody wants to know who makes this and makes that. But this year coming up, I mean, we're going to be bringing a weekly updated ranking show based on what Max Preps does. Of course, we're going to have yours compared to it as well, but we will follow the season, Lee, to find out if the playoffs started today, this is who's in. And then, of course, we will do that through the whole season and have a lot of fun with it. We'll have teams on the bubble. We'll have teams here and there. But if the playoffs were to start this week, today, this is where the teams would be matched up after the rankings come out each week on Max Prep. So it's going to be a lot of fun. We did it in football. We received about a lot of Twitter responses on that saying we're nuts, but it was just following what Max Preps was already set up for. But that's going to be a lot of fun, but we got people to watch.
Oh, without question, that will be a big thing for the lacrosse community. This is something where I can tell you that my weekly ranking is always the most read article for the week. My preseason ranking is almost always the most read article of the year. And even the final rankings certainly get an awful lot of attention to. We finally did our first girls poll last season, and that was very popular with the parents and the girls themselves too. You always like to have, this is something that I've kind of made a point of discussing with people in the national media who cover the sport when we talk about Florida. And I say, look, you've got, we have a hard time drawing the casual sports fan. We have our lacrosse market, which is very geared towards learning and watching and reading about the sport. It's getting that casual sports fan. And one of the ways you do that is create a little controversy where people want to debate it. And, that's been missing from the sport.
Well,
It's
not so much
is going to certainly bring it.
Well, we're not going to bring so much controversy. We're just going to lay it out like it is each week and let them suffer their own controversy if they're on the bubble or if they're in or not. But that's what we're going to do. We're going to have a lot of fun with it for both boys and girls. All classifications, all regions, each week, we will bring you, when the FHSA rankings start to come out each week, we will bring you who's in and who's out. And that's going to be a lot of fun. But it's really interesting to see based on these power rankings too, especially early on. You'll see teams on the bubble that will automatically move all the way up to the front because, and here's the situation, Lee, a lot of these teams won't play their district. So if you got to go back and win the district. So if you're not playing your district teams, we don't know who the district champion is at that time, but we're going to have to go off the Max Preps rankings. And when people see that, they're like, oh my gosh, what's going on? And it's a lot of fun because now everybody starts to talk. Everybody starts to see. And what's really nice, these coaches actually get to see, we're not in the playoffs this week. What do we need to do to get in there? So that's something else that we have a lot of fun with as well.
Well, I think if we put a live chat on the right side of the screen, we'll be getting an awful lot of interesting comments if we could kind of do that. And I would think that besides being on the network, are we going to put any of this maybe on YouTube and
it's going to go, we're going to have it on Roku. We're going to have it on Amazon Fire, Apple TV, Google Play, YouTube. It'll all be everywhere. So anybody can go check it out. If they can't catch the live episode that we do the night of the rankings, they can always go back and watch the rebroadcast on Varsity Sports Network and our other OTT channels. I'll
tell you one thing, Bobby. There is no shortage of parents out there who like to give me their opinion.
Sure. We're looking forward to it. I
enjoy the heck out of it.
I know parents, you do. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk girls coming up here for the 2022 season. We'll go over their 2021 results as well and talk about their season coming up here for 2022. Don't go anywhere. We're with Lee Roddenberg of Florida Lacrosse News here on the Varsity Sports Network. We'll be back right after this.
We're often asked, what's more important in retirement, having a great plan or working with a great advisor? The answer is that both are vitally important to your retirement success. Retirement planning is not just a one and done. Even the best plans will need to be adjusted. That's exactly why we need an experienced advisor to guide you on your journey. How confident are you? Call us today for a second opinion.
Little one, you're gonna grow, and then you're gonna go. Now I'll be waiting, waiting for you back home. So many little things I wanna say, but I know, yes I know you'll be okay. I know, yes I know you'll be okay. Yes I know you'll be okay. Remember me for centuries.
Welcome back, everybody, here to Varsity Sports Network and the presentation of the 2022 High School Lacrosse Preview, brought to you by Florida Lacrosse News. We're joined by Lee Rodenberg out of Boca Raton. And Lee, what a great first hour with the boys talking about their season last year, what happened, and of course, moving into 2022. A lot of fun stuff going to be happening. But you know what? The girls play lacrosse too, and it doesn't get any more competitive than it does here in the state of Florida with the girls' high school programs. You followed them for so long, probably since the beginning of a lot of these programs. So talk to us a little bit about what you've seen with girls lacrosse and how it has evolved here in the state of Florida.
The girls have evolved very similar to the boys in certain ways. The girls had a Vero Beach dynasty, I believe 10 straight state championships, predating FHSA sanction too. And it took a while to get over that hump, and finally Bartram Trail knocked them off, and that started to open it up for the rest of the state. And then you have this, what I would call the duopoly at the top with American Heritage Delray and Lake Highland Prep, who have just traded back and forth the championships the last 3 championship years. Lake Highland Prep had hired Chris Robinson, who was a national known coach from the McDonough School, where he was winning national championships year after year after year. Came down and has really made a difference very quickly with that program. And then you have on the other side John McLean, who has built a powerhouse American Heritage Delray program, including his own particular feeder system too. And the two of them, they've had such great talent. You know, everyone remembers Caitlin Wurzberger, and Lake Highland has certainly had their share of great players. When you look at the Division I college women's programs, there's actually more of them than boys. And that's opened up a lot of interesting recruiting possibilities for the girls down here. And we're taking advantage. There's actually more Division I NCAA women, women playing out of Florida than men. The girls' Final Four in the 1A, we got the predicted matchup. Lake Highland got their revenge for losing in the 2019 championship game. Came back and defeated Lake Highland 11-9. Lake Highland had gotten past Ponte Vedra in the semifinal comfortably. American Heritage had gotten past Community School of Naples, which was another first-time appearance. That was it's interesting because Community School being in Naples, that area over the years had been dominated by Barron Collier. Barron Collier has fallen off. Community School in Naples, and you're seeing all the way up the coast on the West Coast from Naples up to Sarasota, a lot of fill in. So it's great to have seen a Community School of Naples in a Final Four appearance. We had Ponte Vedra had easily gotten past Gulf Breeze and St. Augustine, Lake Highland easily over Cypress Creek and Edgewood. On 2A, we had St. Thomas actually winning the state championship over Vero. Unfortunately, Vero's goalie was injured in the semifinal game and didn't really have a trained backup going into the finals. So it was a little difficult to to see how they could have won that game. Vero had beaten Bartram. Ryan Frechette did not play in that game. She was injured late in the year. Steinbrenner and St. Thomas played that amazing 1-goal game. Then you kind of look back in the early brackets. Bartram, easy win over East Ridge, easy win over Haggerty. Vero over Winter Park comfortably in Celebration. Steinbrenner had beaten Plant and Newsom by 1 goal. Newsom's another team to sort of keep an eye on in 2A.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Along those lines, Stoneman Douglas has had decent teams over the years, but St. Thomas handled them comfortably. So again, not quite as deep on the girls' side yet, which is why I do a top 10 instead of a top 15. But some pretty good programs that have come out of Orlando besides Lake Highland also. Olympia's had their periods, Bishop Moore's had their periods, Haggerty's had their periods. I'm probably leaving someone out who will email me tomorrow.
Well, I mean, Winter Park obviously making it to the region semifinals last year as well here in Orlando. So yeah.
Yeah. So we're at a situation where we're on the way up. That's the beauty of it. Breaking through on 1A is going to be the next challenge for schools. And then in 2A, it looks like it's again going to be pretty wide open. I certainly didn't think anyone was a dominant program in 2A. To be honest, when you looked at on the girls' side, 1A, Lake Highland and American Heritage would have probably won the 2A championship too if they were in that. So there's still a little bit of a mix and a little bit of growth left to do, just like on the boys' side. But even a school like Venice, that fascinated me last year. Venice, I think it was only the second year of the program. Didn't get to play a lot of games. They went 8-1, made the brackets. They won their district in their second year. That's quite an accomplishment. Gulf Breeze is pushing lacrosse. Pensacola is a little bit. It's difficult to be a really good team in Pensacola right now, because if you want to play the really top teams, you're traveling.
Travel a little bit. Yeah.
Just horrible.
Yeah.
Man, this is something that I always have to educate people on who are not in Florida, is the distances that some of our schools travel. When I tell people Boca to Pensacola is the equivalent distance to Washington, D.C. to Atlanta, they have a hard time understanding that.
Exactly. You're exactly right. I mean, that's a drive and a half.
And then Pensacola, you've got another 100 miles before you're into, I guess it's the tip of Alabama. And so, you just, as I mentioned, Ponte Vedra coming down to play St. John Paul during the week, 5 hours each way. And it's not unusual for 2.5, 3 hours, this regional finals.
Right.
Cardinal Mooney going over to Jupiter in years past. That's 3.5, 4 hours.
Mm-hmm.
How do you do that? It's even a little bit more difficult because depth is not there yet in quality programs. They're getting there, but you're probably, I'm guessing the usual time frame, they probably have another 2 to 3 years before they have enough teams in their regions that they can make legitimate schedules and not have to travel as much in order to do so. And again, unintended consequences. Let's see how the Max Preps Power Rankings play out. There's going to be districts that are one and done, without question. When you look through these districts on the girls' side, you look through them on the boys' side, one and done. But the girls had a great playoff last year, without question. We had a great time seeing the growth, the quality of the girls, where they're going to play in the women's programs has just taken leaps and bounds. The coaching continues to improve. And the girls on the youth side, they're all over the place, Bobby.
Right.
You go to these club events and younger. And if anything, they maybe look up to their older kids even more than the boys do.
Oh, I'm sure they do.
And it's only going to continue to grow on the girls' side. I've seen a couple of schools where the boys program has not had enough interest at the lower end of the spectrum to field the squad, unfortunately. I've not seen that yet on the girls' side.
That's
And
great.
I think
That's great to hear.
definitely sort of an insight into how this is going to continue to grow.
Well, Lee, it's been a great show. The 2022 season is going to be phenomenal coming up here for high school lacrosse. We're so excited. We'll be covering a lot of the matches on Varsity Sports Network, especially up here in the Orlando area and in the South Florida area. We have a crew now in Pensacola. We also have a crew in Tallahassee. We've got the state covered, man. We're going to be covering lacrosse left and right all year long. And plus, with our partnership with the NFHS Network, we'll be able to get some of the highlights throughout the year with them as well. So we're excited to be bringing you this show each week, the Florida Lacrosse News on Varsity Sports Network with Lee Roggenberg. I got it right. But Lee, thank you so much. You are an inspiration to everybody here in Florida lacrosse. So we thank you for joining us here on Varsity Sports Network.
Bobby, I appreciate the compliment. Looking forward to a fabulous year and a great cooperation with your network in order to just finally really drive this sport into the conscience of all the sports fans in the state.
No doubt. It's about to happen. And I'll tell you what, we're going to make it work. Lee, thank you so much for joining us here today. The Florida Lacrosse News Network is on the Varsity Sports Network. I'm Bobby Latmore. We will see you next week for more exciting lacrosse here on the Varsity Sports Network.